Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing again. Believe in a power greater than what you are going through. When you don't know what to do, keep breathing.
From the City of Angels in Los Angeles, welcome to all my listeners out there in Radio Land. I'm Dave, the Caregiver's Caregiver at caregiverdave.com, along with my lovely co-host, best-selling author and former mayor of Grover Beach in Central California, which is a California beach town, Debbie Peterson. Also coming to you live and on demand 24/7 on numerous syndicated radio and podcast networks on 30 audio and video platforms. In fact, we are proud to be voted #1 caregiver podcast on FeedSpot out of thousands and #1 podcast of the top 50 on Player FM. And we have an exciting show planned for you today. Caregivers are healers, and healers can learn to take comfort and pride in their good works. Ron Schneebaum, MD, regularly noted the power and importance of love for the human psyche. He also saw that when love is not felt, self-worth crumbles. Amen to that. And enjoyment of life decreases. His personal observation showed him that the effects of not feeling loved can last a lifetime. These include poor self-esteem, an inner voice of constant negativity, painful emotions, and much more. Before we get started, I do want to thank my last week's guest, Lindsay Barnett, navigating the world of work while caregiving. Just a reminder, you can watch or listen to that interview and all our interviews on our membership website, caregiverdave.com, or any of our other 30 global audio and video networks. All right, enough of that. Ron, so great to have you on the Caregiver Dave Show.
It's a pleasure to be here. It really is. I'm humbled by it. The work you do, the work your audience does it's remarkable.
You hear that, Debbie? He's humbled by it.
That's great.
So I always like to ask my guests the first question. Just who is Ron Schneebaum, and why was he placed on this earth?
Well, it's an interesting question that's evolved over time. I really had no idea what I was doing with my life and who I was. And I had done a bunch of things. I was a teacher. I had a master's in education. I decided I needed perspective, so I traveled. I worked in a logging camp in the Alaskan wilderness. And then I thought the business world would be worth exploring. I was a New Yorker, so doing that in Manhattan was the only place I could imagine. And so I was at an entry-level job in a newspaper advertising-related business. And one day I was sitting on a park bench on the Upper East Side overlooking the East River, and an advertisement fell out of the newspaper I was reading and landed on my lap. Mm-hmm. And I was impressed by this piece of cardstock, this beige cardstock, and it described a program that was a pre-medical program at Columbia University for college graduates who hadn't taken the needed math and science courses. Well, I never did, and that intrigued me enough. So as I read it, an image came to mind. And it was a picture of someone having a heart attack who was probably in his mid-40s. And I thought he would want to have someone of quality to take care of his heart disease. But then I thought he would also have questions about, what do I do with my life? What do I tell my family and friends? What goes on with this? Mm-hmm. And I thought he wouldn't seek psychiatric help for this, but he would go to a physician who was taking care of his heart. And in that moment, I said, that's what I want to do. And that's what I fashioned my career about. And what was interesting for me over time was I realized that we think in two different ways. We think with our intellects, and that was all of my scientific training and medical background, but we also think with our hearts. Mm. And when we think with our hearts, what we do is through our caring and love, we can imagine somebody else's experience. And then from that space, we see their questions and we ask, how do I support them? How do I help them? What do I do for them? And that when we and then when we act on that and we have that combination of caring about others and using our intellect, then we have the balance we need. And that's what you do when you care for your wife. You think about the physical realities of what you need to do, but you also think about her experience and think, how do I act in a way that supports her? And so my career was based on that. And the more I developed it, the more I grew. And then finally I said, you know what? This stuff is important enough. I want to write about it. So I retired so I could spend my full time writing and just recently published my book.
Awesome. Wow. So, how can burnout be prevented or healed? Because that's number one cause of caregiver deaths. 30% die, and 40% if you're watching an Alzheimer or dementia patient, and many more become sicker than the ones they're caring for, eventually needing a caregiver of their own, all
Yeah.
because of burnout.
Yeah.
So
So there
let
are
me hear your
several
wisdom on that.
steps. There are several steps, and each take a little bit of a different angle. One is to appreciate that you didn't ask for this thing. You know, it wasn't part of your deal. You know, you never planned on it, you never imagined it, and here it is. And that there's no reason in the world you should be good. Like, why should you? You've never been in that situation, and suddenly you have to do things that you never imagined that you had to do before. You know, you talked about besides taking care of the physical responsibilities of your loved one, then it also can easily happen that whether your relationship was great or not, it's hard. Because as people are sick, they can be cranky and grumpy. And dealing with that, here you are, you're trying to do your best and they get grumpy. And you can think at times that you're not succeeding. Now, we'll address these various points. And then also, you can have all kinds of challenges from people around you. You know, and so we should talk about that. And so how you put all that together is really what the package is. So burnout happens when our love and enthusiasm that we originally have is no longer there. We burn out. So part of it is to say, how do I keep this love and enthusiasm? So you manage it. So there are several things. Suppose someone has financial means. Then part of what to appreciate is what can I do and what don't I do well? You know, you might decide, you might appreciate, you know, I need some time to run, to meditate, to play, whatever it is, and to figure out, unless it's a critical moment in your loved one's life, the one you're caring for's life, you need to figure out, how do I take time for that? And it's not bad. You're not guilty. You're doing that because that restores your strength. So, you know, it's the old deal if you have to take care of yourself. And then the other one is you can't feel guilty because there's no one to feel guilty toward. You're doing your best. You know, there's no guilt in doing your best. Are you perfect? No, but that's like saying, you know, if I were to play any sport, do I feel guilty because I'm not as good as a professional who plays? Of course not. You do your best you can. Now, another thing I thought of when I was listening to some of your other episodes is what our goal is. If we have an image of what our goal is, we can't possibly reach it. You know, we think we want the person that we're caring for to be healed, to be cured, to be jolly, to be whatever it is, to not be hurting. Well, we can't control any of that. So all you can think of on a daily basis is what I want to do is be as loving and as helpful as I can be. That's it. And then, I'm sorry, your voice isn't coming across, Dave.
You're muted.
Did you get that text I sent you?
Oh,
Did I?
No, that's for Debbie.
Okay.
So self-care is what we're talking about, right?
Exactly.
So can you give us some examples of how a burned out caregiver who feels like they're been neglected, their siblings don't help them, they feel like they're in caregiver prison with no possibility of parole, any simple steps, quote on simple, that caregivers can use to maybe fit into a busy day?
Yeah, so this is caregivers or non-caregivers. And that's about thinking about the day before you wake up. So here is, you get up in the morning. If you need to set your alarm clock, set your alarm clock for 10 or 15 minutes earlier, okay? Mm-hmm. And then go through your day, picture your day in 3 different ways. First, do a bird's eye overview of what you have to do. You have to get up and you can fill in the blanks for what it's like in your situation. Mm-hmm. And you just do a little bird's eye view of how it goes. Then do another view and look at things more specifically. And you realize we have this doctor's appointment and I've been taking notes. I want to make sure I take these notes with me, or I want to take the bag that has such and such with me. Right. And you go through your day and think about that. And then the third part, do it one more time. And this time, picture how you want to be in the various situations. What kind of moods you want to have around breakfast?
Mm-hmm.
How do you maintain not getting triggered? Your mother-in-law is coming. How do you maintain not getting triggered when she's there? To appreciate why, and to picture it a little bit and say, yeah, she's going to say these things and I'm going to let them slide. Or it's going to happen that my sister is calling and I'm so mad at her that she doesn't help. And then you realize I can hold at being mad at her, but that's not going to make her change.
Right.
So that would be like swimming in cold water and being mad the water's cold. So to be able to say, how can I put that aside so that I can be present in the way that I want to be present? And that takes some work to work on how do I let go of my anger about her. But that takes a minute of work so that if we do this on a daily basis, we'll get better at it. Just suppose you were a musician and you're working on a piece you wanted to play. Well, you're not going to be great the first time you go through it. And then the next thing to do is at the end of the day, when you get into bed, just before you drift off to sleep, picture the day going backwards. Start from where you are now, and this time do the helicopter view and say to yourself, how did I do with my sister? What? Did she trigger me? Did I pull it off the way I wanted to? What got me? And you're doing this not to blame yourself, but just to say, how can I do it better the next time? And in this space, you really can come to appreciate how you do the various appointments, what pressures you're feeling, how you manage with them. And that alone can be helpful.
So what about if you've been trying all of this, but sometimes all of the exterior stuff that goes on just gets to you and the intangibles are much more difficult to accomplish. So
sure.
How do you
sometimes you need to figure out what your general way out is. It could be that for you, it's running. It could be that for you, it's saying, I need an evening of going out with my best friend and drinking and having her or him just listen to me. So to think of what are the various things that you need, or it could be you decide, I need some professional help in certain ways, whether as a therapist or as a caregiver. I can't do this all the time. I need to have somebody for the weekends. And it might not be ideal, and the person I'm taking care of might want more of me, but the more of me isn't going to allow me to be my best, then that's not helpful. So it really is saying what works for me and how do I do that?
Mm-hmm.
The part that's really a hard one is you can listen to something that's great like Dave's podcast and your podcast, but a lot of time you're alone in this thing because nobody wants to hear your problem. Nobody wants to hear your problem. They have their own problems. So it's a matter of saying, look, and then there's another way you need to pat yourself on the back. You can say, look, I might not be perfect, but I'm a lot better than not being here. I might not be perfect, but I love her or I love him and I'm trying to do my best.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay if I'm not perfect. If there's a religious side of you, you can say, dear God, give me some confidence. Give me some, throw some love this way. I could use it.
Mm-hmm. That's the old what went right, what went wrong, how can I make it better routine.
Yeah, and to spend time with that, to really make it a project. Let me throw in one other thing that I do. And you had mentioned you're being a man of faith over time.
Yeah.
One of the things that I said, and this is whether somebody's a person of faith or not, is that this thing called love is transcendent and exists in the world. And it's in each of us. So that if a person next to me drops something, I don't say, I'm not going to help them pick it up because I first have to have compassion in me. No, it's there, it's in me. And so one of the things that I do, I had a friend who would read something religious or spiritual before he went to bed.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't help me because if I read something, someday it could light me up, but the other day the words fell flat. So I said, let me hack this thing. Let me start with that feeling of the inspiration that I feel when I read something incredible. So suppose you read the most wonderful verse in the Bible that you love. Then you can let me live in that feeling of what that is. And over time, let me work at dropping the words and remembering that feeling. Then when you add to that, when you do this little exercise in the morning, start with filling yourself with love. And at the end of the day, fill yourself with love. And at times, one of the things I used to do when I went to my medical office, when I sat in the parking lot, I would get quiet for a minute and I'd close my eyes and ask love to join me. So before you go out to meet the person you're caring for, just close your eyes and ask love to join you. I've never had an experience where that didn't make a difference.
Love is pretty powerful.
Well, I'm wondering if I don't remember if you've covered how do you do the best you can with your physician? Can you apply some of this to when you have to go see a physician?
Physicians are hard. I'm just trying to develop a talk about how we don't learn how to interact with people in medical school. We just don't. We have a bit of a auto mechanic approach. So probably the best things are, when things come up during the week, drop yourself a note in your phone and then go through them and ask your questions. And know that the physician is there, or the whatever level of practitioner is there, really wants to help you. They really do. So ask your questions. I was talking to a friend just yesterday morning, because this podcast, who had to care for his wife who was dying of cancer, not had to, but cared for his wife while she was dying of cancer. And when he would call for help, call nurses for help, he would start by saying, I know you're so busy, and so on. And that would help him feel okay with asking. They never cared. That's what they want to do. So to remember your questions and ask them. And if you discover that there's someone who's a creep, trust your instincts. See if you can find someone else. Most cases, they don't. Most cases, if there are people that work with folks with chronic illness or chronic problems or death and dying, they're generally nice people. That's why they're doing that. So don't feel you're abusing them, asking me questions. And some of the things that happens, his friend was telling me, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So just say that. I don't even know what to ask you. He was telling me that when his wife was having pain, he had to regulate how much morphine he gave her. Now, at the same time, he was a therapist and knew that morphine could cause breathing suppression. And at these times, she didn't breathe well. And so then he was caught in this place of, what do I do? And so he had to ask them, to get guidelines. So know that we don't know. We're not doctors when we're caring for someone. As I said, we didn't sign up for this.
After you.
And what about if your person you're caring for is unwilling to go to see the doctor, or unwilling to get assistance medically? Any suggestions on that one?
Yeah, one of the interesting things, two things. This is a great one, because I was thinking I might want to spend some time talking about parents who have a child who's got significant disabilities. That's a different level of caring. And the reason I was thinking of that one, there are spouses and the other children that are part of the whole picture. But one of the things that I describe in my book is what I call family meetings. And this potentially can happen with the person you're caring for, if they're lucid, where at a time that's a prearranged time, to sit down and talk about the issues that are difficult. And to say, I want you to take your medicine and you refuse to. I don't know what to do. Should I just give you the space and not have you take it, or I force you to take it? What do I do? So that's, it's possible that something could happen there. The other one I discovered in my, in thinking of my mom, our job isn't necessarily to be their doctors and make them take their medicines, even if that means that their demise might come sooner. In the end, we would rather have a good relationship with them than to be the enforcer.
Yeah. One way I look at it, because my wife's 81, and she doesn't always do what I want her to do when it comes to her care, And sometimes I say, my gosh, she's 81. She's lived most of her life. She has been living in a broken body for almost 30 years. I'd probably be the same way. It's like, want quality of life, not quantity. We want to keep her alive till she's 100? She doesn't want that, right? Exactly. So you got to ask yourself these questions. Also,
now, I had this interesting experience. If I could cut you off for a second. The same fellow I was talking about, I had the opportunity to drive his wife to some medical appointments. And that was another great thing, where he was able to ask me if I could do it. And not everybody can do that.
Right.
And we had these wonderful visits. And she said to me, and this, shortly before she's dying. She had family came to town, her kids were there, and she said, "I'm the luckiest person in the world." So if you could develop that relationship with your wife where you let go of trying to make her do things and instead you focus on the quality of your life together, that's what you and she will remember. That's what makes life important.
That's true. What about the grumpiness? Is that a symptom of the grief process? Whether it's anticipatory grief, or even when they die, there's sibling problems with the family. Nobody agrees on what you should do next. I mean, you got about 5 minutes to deal with all of that.
Yeah. So I think one thing to know is that people won't change. Stay in your own zone. I think of what I call, family gathering forgiveness, where you want to get past the wrapping paper and try to find the person who is also going through this grieving process with you. You want to be people, and if that means you feel you get stepped on, so be it. Because other ways aren't going to change it. Like if you need to take legal action, go ahead and do that. That's fine. But if your sister is unpleasant when she's with your mother or something, let them have their own relationship. You can't fix it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what's your idea of the grief process? I mean, are there 5 stages of grief? Are there more? Are there less? And how do you get to acceptance quickly?
Well, it goes several ways. One is it depends on the individual situation. Nobody should tell you what's right and wrong and how long you should grieve. If you grieve because you love the person. Now, on the other hand, I think two things that are helpful. One is to say to yourself, what would the person who just passed away want me to do? Yeah. Would he or she want me to be miserable and walk around and sulk? Or would she rather not? Another one to know I can talk to them. I can be on the golf course and say, how do you think I did with that shot? You're allowed to be crazy if people think you're crazy. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, take any impression that you have that's helpful to heart. So what I meant by that is I knew a woman who's distraught at her mother's death. And then she said at some point, she knew her mother was okay. And I thought, live with that. Know that she is.
Yeah.
And so and the other thing we can do is first to take some time that's real, and we can compartmentalize things. We can spend some time when we feel miserable. We can take a walk, and on this walk, talk to them and say, how could you have left me? That was the stupidest thing you ever did. We're allowed to do that. But don't listen to anybody else. Do what you need to do.
That's good.
That's great advice. I'm wondering, we've been talking about your book, but we don't know the name of it yet.
So it is called Bigger Hearted.
Bigger Hearted.
Hearted.
Bigger Hearted. Okay.
Yes, it's like having a bigger heart. A retired pediatrician's prescriptions for living a happier life.
That's wonderful.
What do you want people to get out of that?
It, on the one hand, talks about thinking with the heart and that we are all capable of connecting with love no matter how bad our backgrounds are. Mm-hmm. And then it goes through various things that get in our way. Worrying too much, our emotions getting in the way, feelings of self-doubt, stress, past injuries and hurts, childhood injuries. And it takes you through those and how you can work with them.
Wow.
So that you can then be yourself. The model is, what the goal is, there are times in life when we're fully present. So it could be we're hitting a golf ball, or we're playing tennis, or listening to music, and there's nothing else on our mind but that moment. That's what we want to be. As much as we can be that. And we can do that if, instead of blankly living, we're trying to say, how do I serve this person? How do I act in the most loving way possible? Then we're not worrying about ourselves.
And where can people find that book, and how can they reach you? Do you have
anywhere you get books? My website is biggerhearted.com.
That's easy to remember.
Biggerhearted.com. And yeah, I'd love to connect with people.
Awesome. I can't believe how fast our time has gone, man. It just sped by.
It seems like 5 minutes.
That's because, we're having fun. Time goes fast.
And it's great stuff. It's like, like trying to live a better life. And the art of caregiving, it's like a holy act.
Yeah.
It really is a holy act. And you don't have to be perfect. There's no such thing as perfect.
So if someone wants to buy your book, it's available everywhere, right? Or not yet? Okay.
It's available everywhere.
And what is your email or your best contact information?
So the best contact is ron@biggerhearted.com.
Okay, great.
I offer workshops through that, seminars, individual sessions. I'm developing my social media platform. That'll be fun too.
And Debbie, how can people reach you? We're living in very interesting political times. I think people who were never political are being forced to be political these days. And that's how you save a country. So how can people reach you?
If you Google, this is going to sound bizarre, but Corruption Chronicles, Debbie Peterson, you'll find a whole bunch of podcasts that have a lot of really helpful information about how to work with local government and how to fix it when it's broken.
Yeah, Ben Franklin said, evil men rule when good men do nothing. So the good men have to get off their butt, and women, of course. Remember, all our live shows become recorded pod and video casts on your favorite platforms. My #1 best-selling book, It's Your Life Too, How to Survive and Thrive as a Caregiver, is available wherever books are sold, and also on my free membership website, caregiverdave.com, where you can also schedule a free 30-minute initial coaching call, talk about whatever you're struggling with. You can also join my community of 34,000 caregivers on Facebook at Caregiver Dave. We have lots of tools, resources, videos, this radio show, and much, much more. And if you click the like or follow button on whatever you're listening to right now, it helps Google reach even more caregivers. So again, a big thank you to all my listeners out there and my guests and my co-hosts all over the world for tuning in every Wednesday and making us the #1 caregiver podcast on the internet. Until next week, same time, same channel. May God richly bless you. Thank you, guys.
I'm Dave Nasani. My 4th book, Secrets from the Hammock, Uncommon Wisdom for Uncommon Times, is a #1 bestseller on Amazon. As a young boy, I was told that I possessed an unusual amount of wisdom for my age. As a teenager, I found myself counseling friends and family whenever they needed answers to their problems. Then at 21, I read the Bible for the very first time and learned how King Solomon asked God for wisdom instead of riches, yet he received both. I was so impressed that I too asked God for wisdom. Soon after, I discovered when lying on my hammock, I would receive wisdom from God. This book is a result of my passion to share with the world wisdom's tremendous benefits. Join me as I reveal practical aspects of wisdom for the mind, body, and spirit. 31 lessons I learned from God that can change your life. Available in Kindle, Audible, paperback, and hardcover, wherever books are sold. I've spoken all over the country and London, and am available to speak at your event. Contact me at hammockwisdom.com.
Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing.